Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Paige, here once again with another video on The Flash Season 4. So this is going to be my review for Episode 5, otherwise entitled Girls Night Out. Now obviously before we get into the rest of the video, there will be spoilers in this video or in this review because we're going to be talking about the major talking points of this episode. So if you've not watched the episode, go do that, then come back to this video later on. So last episode was really an episode where we were properly introduced to the new character for this season, otherwise known as Ralph Dabney, and who will most likely later be known as the Elongated Man. And that's essentially where we continue on in this episode from the last one, where we see Ralph sort of, learning more about his abilities. It was just a tease about it. I think next episode is meant to be an episode where they really delve deeper into Ralph learning his abilities, because this episode wasn't really the right episode to go about that. And it will just be interesting to see how the CGI around the character, can stay consistent, because I thought last episode was pretty good. This episode, that scene with it didn't look amazing. I don't think it was that great, just because it wasn't that much of a focus, so I guess they didn't feel the need to spend too much on that. But yeah, it didn't look too good this episode, the CGI in regards to Ralph's powers, but hopefully next episode, when they focus more on it, it looks a bit better. Now, our first confrontation of the episode came when Norvok, who we had met back in episode 1, came to pay Caitlin a bit of a visit and just give her a bit of a message that someone called Amina, who we had name dropped in episode 1 as well, was sort of wanting Caitlin or Killer Frost. And this was at the bachelorette party, so we had Iris with Cecile, Felicity came over from Arrow, as well as Caitlin at this bachelorette party. I do have issues with both the bachelor party and the bachelorette party, because surely Iris and Barry have, other people that they would have invited to these things. So unless they had specified this was a work thing, then fair enough, but I don't think they did, so I just thought it was a bit weird that there weren't other people there. But you can understand why they didn't put other people in there, because we had never met anyone else. Really, they could have introduced someone and they could have been a big part, and we would have been like, okay, we've literally never met this person before, so why are they here? So I can understand why they just basically kept it to characters that are actually a part of the show. Now, it was pretty interesting that the boys actually didn't invite Ralph to the bachelorette party, or the bachelor party, might I say. I thought that was a bit weird, just because he's a part of the team now, so I don't know why they did that. I don't know what they were going for there, but of course, maybe they had good reasoning, because Ralph actually ends up dragging the boys off to the strip club, where a decent amount goes down. One of which is drunk Barry. We did see a concoction that Cisco had made up, basically sort of similar to the one that Caitlin made back in season 1, I think it was. So it's been a while since we've seen one of those alcoholic concoctions, might I say, for Barry. But Cisco sort of didn't get it right, so we get basically ultra drunk Barry, completely wasted. And I think drunk Barry is the best Barry that's possible on the show. He was hilarious, because it's just hilarious. I love chicken wings too, Barry. You're not alone there. But I guess one of the more strange reveals, and I wasn't really expecting it, and it was sort of a weird little story that they went for, was when we find out that Cecile's daughter is actually a stripper at this strip club. I was like, okay, what the hell? I had a bit of a laugh there. And they explained why, she's trying to get some, research, if you want to call it that. But, that was a bit strange. I don't know if I was the only one that found that weird. But one of the big plays in this episode, we knew we were meeting her thanks to the synopsis and also the trailer for this episode. We were going to be meeting Amina Black, who obviously Norvok, might I say, had referenced earlier, who was otherwise known as Blacksmith from the comics. Now, Amina Black was actually played by Katie Sackhoff, and I thought she did a really good job in this episode. I'm excited to see what they do with her going forward. I don't know if she's going to be appearing in any more episodes in this first half of the season. I think if they're going to bring her back, they'll save her for the back half, whether an episode or a couple back there, and delve more into Caitlin and Killer Frost in that time. And because she'll probably be involved with more metahuman stuff, which we know the Thinker is involved with, so they might team up, or the Thinker might get Amina to do some work for him, who knows. But we find out that Amina actually has one of the bus metas, who we did see in episode 3. He was one of the people on the bus, and she's using him to produce a drug, essentially, a love drug. So basically he cries a drug, which I thought was weird, but they might do something interesting with that going forward with that character. But yeah, it was a bit random, but still pretty cool, I guess. But Caitlin was tied with Amina because essentially, I think a lot of people had predicted this, because one of the little character descriptions for Aminet, that maybe Aminet had supplied something to Caitlin to help her with her Killer Frost abilities if Caitlin in turn did stuff for Aminet. And that's essentially what happened. Aminet gave her some sort of tech which let her control it more, let her be Caitlin. But in turn for that, Amina made Caitlin be like her muscle and do stuff for her, which makes sense. And I think a lot of people were predicting this because I'd called it like a sort of like a Hulk thing, like Caitlin instead of hulking out, like Frost's out and goes Killer Frost. And of course, Felicity does make an Incredible Hulk reference in this episode. And I did see some people going, oh my god, that's a Marvel reference. They've done it before. I think they did something about Spider-Man or something like that. Or even Iron Man. I think they did that back in one of the other seasons. So it's not that strange. But the Blacksmith v Killer Frost fight I thought was pretty cool. Blacksmith's abilities are a bit different than they are in the comics. I don't know, does she have to have that bucket of metal? Does it have to be that exact metal for her to use? Or is that just a really strong metal that she likes to use? They didn't really explain that too much. They just had her carrying around that bucket all the time. And if that's the case, I wouldn't want her powers, to be completely honest. I'd want something else, because those powers don't seem that cool if you're constantly having to carry a bucket of like alloy around. Not the biggest fan of that, but I don't know, they might explore that later on down the season. But because with more Killer Frost, they are able to explore more Killer Frost powers, and I do think even that time when they're in the warehouse and Caitlin makes that like almost like an igloo, like an ice dome, I thought was pretty cool to protect themselves. And I do think when Killer Frost pops up more, even if like you're just Caitlin using her abilities in a good sense, they can produce a lot of cool stuff, because really you could just make a lot of different things out of ice, and you know, there's a lot of cool potential there, so hopefully we see more of it. One thing I thought was pretty interesting this episode was seeing Joe being like scared of having another child, because he sort of like teetered and tottered, if that's the correct term, since we've learnt that Cecile is pregnant. Like, oh, he was like sort of like shocked, then he was happy, then he was like worried, so he's going through all these different emotions, which I guess is normal, but so it's more about him, like how old he is, because really like Barry and Iris are heading into their 30s now, and Joe's about to have another kid, and like a sibling for those two. So there's a lot of different things going on there, and you can understand why Joe is a bit scared. So it will be interesting to see how they explore that, because, you know, Cecile's going to be pregnant for much more of the season, if not the entire season. But the big relationship for this episode, or the character building or relationship building in this episode, was definitely between Iris and Caitlin / Killer Frost. This episode, like, that's obviously what they were going for. You could tell from some of the stuff leading up to this episode that Iris was going to be very attached to Caitlin this episode, in regards to trying to control her and trying to make Caitlin and sort of, you know, not make Killer Frost as bad. Because I don't think anyone would not debate this. Like, Iris and Caitlin have never really been that close on the show, even though obviously they're working together almost every single day. And you can even argue with like Felicity as well, like coming to the thing, like Felicity wasn't really close to any like Iris. Like, if anything, she was probably closer to Caitlin. So you could argue that maybe even Felicity coming to the bachelorette party was a bit random, and you think there'd be someone closer to Iris that she would invite rather than Felicity. But really, this whole Caitlin and Iris stuff in this episode eventually leads to Caitlin being made Iris's maid of honor for her wedding, which we obviously know is going to be happening in episode 8. Or in the crossover, might I say, for this season. Some could argue that this is rushed, but I'd rather them just get this storyline over than stretch it over like 4 episodes, and like, you know, Caitlin and Iris is back and forth, and then eventually she's made the maid of honor. I'd rather them get it over and done with in one episode. And I thought Iris was actually good this episode. I don't think you could really complain about Iris. In every other episode before this, there's been a lot of Iris moments where you're like, no, stop. But this episode was really good for Iris. Some might disagree with me, but I didn't really find any moments in this episode where I was like, shut up, Iris, keep going. I thought Iris was good this episode. I thought all the female characters were good. I thought it was a really strong episode for all of them. But this episode actually ends with that drug meta being approached by none other than Clifford DeVoe, aka The Thinker, in his floating chair. We actually get the debut of that. I wasn't expecting that, because I know in the mid-season finale we're meant to get something like that. So I thought that might be the debut of the floating chair, but we get it in this episode, and it looked pretty cool. Has a lot of weaponry on it, so that could do some damage. So the Thinker, you know, could cause the Flash some issues with that floating chair, which definitely is weaponized. But it will be interesting to see what DeVoe has planned for that meta, because that's why he captured him. Like, his job wasn't done, so I wonder what DeVoe has planned for him. But overall, I thought this was actually a really decent episode. This was an episode where Barry wasn't in his Flash suit. I wonder if anyone noticed that. I knew that going in, because they'd said that the Flash wouldn't be suiting up this episode. But yeah, so, and like, Barry was still really funny in this episode and a good character because he was drunk Barry. So this was more of an episode for like Caitlin and the females of the show to shine and go on their own little mission. So I thought it was actually a really decent episode. Not the best episode of the season, but still enjoyable. A lot of comedy, and I think this was a suitable episode to have that comedy. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it to show your support. Let me know in the comments section down below, what did you like about this episode? What didn't you like? What was your favorite moment? Just leave all of them in the comments section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.